Question 45. If a coin is tossed twice, what is the probability of getting a head and a tail? A coin is tossed twice. What are the outcomes? First, we have to find the outcomes, then we find the probability of getting a head and a tail. Now, the outcomes can be done in table form, where we have it in this format. You have, for the first outcome, you have the head and the tail. This is the first outcome. When you toss the coin the first time, you can either get a head or a tail. When you toss it the second time, you can also either get a head or a tail. We now make a table out of it. So when you toss it the first time, you can get the head, then second time you can also get a head. So you have head, head. Considering the first toss of having a head, you can get a tail when you toss it the second time. So you have a head and a tail. Now what this tail is saying is that, let's say you toss the coin the first time, you get a tail. That's for the first time. The second time you toss it again, you can get a head. So you have a head, tail. You join the head and the tail. Now for the last time you toss it the first time, you can get a tail. The second time you can also get a tail. That's tail, tail. These are all the outcomes you can get. There are 4 of them. You can either get a head and a head and a tail, also a head and a tail, and a tail and a tail. Although you have a head and a tail here, the tail might come first before the head. You can still write it as a head and a tail. So the question says, what is the probability of getting a head and a tail? Now these are all the outcomes. The probability of getting a head and a tail is outcome of head and tail over total outcome. The total outcome is 4, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the total outcomes. So you have 4 over getting a head and a tail. You have a head and a tail here and a head and a tail here. So you have 2 heads and tails from our 4 outcomes. So this is 2 over 4. And then we call this to the lowest term. You have 2 in 2, 1, 2 in 4, 2. So you have your final answer as 1 over 2, or half. So the probability of getting a head and a tail is B, that's half. In addition, to get your outcomes, you can do it logically or by just getting out the outcome if you're very good at it, or you can use a tree diagram. Logical way. Method 2. Let's start with the logical way of getting it. If you are tossing a coin twice, let's say for your first toss you get a head. The second toss you still get a head. This is one outcome. You can also toss it and get a head first. But while getting a head first, the second time you toss, rather than get a head, you get a tail. That's the second outcome. The third outcome is you toss it, you get a tail first. Then you toss it again the second time. This time you get a head. So you have a tail head, which is same thing as head tail. Both of them are the same. Since it's not specified in the question that the first outcome should be a tail first, then a head, then either tail head or head tail work under the probability of getting a head and a tail. It didn't specify that the head must come first or the tail must come first. They just said a head and a tail. And the last outcome will be first toss you get a tail, and the second toss you also get a tail. So you have 4 outcomes, and the probability of getting a head and a tail is 2. This 2 out of the total 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have it as 2 over 4, which to the lowest term is 2 in 2, 1, 2 in 4, 2, half. Method 3. Tree diagram. You can also get out all the outcomes and be able to get the exact outcome you need, that's the head and the tail, by using a tree diagram where you have your head and the tail here. That's your first outcome. Then second outcome, the head will get the head and the tail, and the tail will also get the head and the tail. This is the second set of outcomes. So we will use this diagram to get out all our outcomes. So we go like this. We start from here. The head, that's one outcome. The same head to tail, that's head to tail. That's second outcome. Then tail first, then head next. Tail, head. Then last one is tail, then second toss gives you tail too. So you have tail, tail. We also still have our 4 outcomes, and it's best to arrange this having the H before the T, still the same thing in this case, except when specified that you have to get a tail before a head. Still same 4 outcomes. Then question says probability of getting a head and a tail, not specifying that the head must come first. There are two ways of getting a head and a tail. Either you get the head before the tail or the tail before the head. That there are two of them and the total outcome is 4. That head 1, head tail 2, tail head 3 and tail 4. So we have 4, and the probability of getting a head and a tail equals number of head and tail over total outcome, which is 2 over 4. To lowest term, 2 into 1, 2 in 4, 2, still half. So you can either choose to use a table, a tree diagram, or do it manually. Whichever one you're comfortable with, you apply it. Probability is actually easy, but you have to be able to comprehend the question.